The night Dutch Schultz drew on Lucky Luciano. The atmosphere turned ice cold the moment Dutch Schultz produced the weapon. Not the ordinary quiet when conversations end. The type where every person holds their breath. Where the clock appears to stop ticking. Where a dozen of America's most feared criminals suddenly understand they're about to see a killing or become participants in one. The date was October 15, 1935. The Waldorf Astoria Hotel, New York City. The Commission's first formal gathering since Lucky Luciano had established it 4 years prior. 5 crime families, 12 crime bosses, all assembled in a smoke-laden suite to determine the direction of organized crime across America. The subject at hand: what action to take regarding Special Prosecutor Thomas Dewey, the straight-arrow lawman who was imprisoning gangsters quicker than they could corrupt judges. Dutch Schultz proposed a straightforward answer. We eliminate him. Lucky Luciano responded no. That's when Dutch, the Dutchman, the Bronx bootleg king, the individual who'd executed over 30 people without hesitation, reached beneath his jacket, drew a .45 automatic, and pointed it straight at Lucky Luciano's skull. Before 11 witnesses, at a commission gathering, the supreme breach of every regulation Lucky had constructed over 4 years. The weapon remained steady. Dutch's finger rested on the trigger mechanism. His complexion burned red with fury. You're refusing me? You, some street punk from the Lower East Side. Lucky remained motionless, didn't react, simply stared at Dutch with those icy, strategic eyes, and uttered something that forced Dutch Schultz, the man who'd never surrendered to anyone, to drop his weapon and plead for leniency. What Lucky voiced in that instant didn't merely preserve his existence. It transformed the commission permanently. Understanding the conflict. To grasp why Dutch Schultz aimed a firearm at Lucky Luciano, you must comprehend what Thomas Dewey was accomplishing against organized crime in 1935. Thomas Edmund Dewey was 33 years old, a Republican prosecutor harboring political aspirations and an unblemished reputation. He'd been designated special prosecutor for New York County with a single objective: eliminate organized crime. And he was genuinely succeeding. Dewey refused to follow the traditional playbook. You couldn't purchase him. You couldn't threaten him. You couldn't convince him to ignore things. He constructed cases systematically, converted witnesses, traced financial trails. Within 18 months, he'd obtained guilty verdicts against 3 significant mob leaders and was preparing cases against countless others. For old-school crime bosses like Dutch Schleswig, this situation was unheard of. Previously, when you encountered prosecutor difficulties, you compensated them or frightened them away. Straightforward. But Dewey represented something different. He was a reformer, and reformers don't intimidate easily. Dutch Schultz experienced the squeeze more than anybody. Dewey had been examining Dutch's numbers operation in Harlem for many months. He possessed informants. He held financial records. He accumulated sufficient proof to imprison Dutch for 2 decades. Dutch understood what incarceration signified for someone like himself. He'd witnessed bosses enter strong and emerge destroyed. He was 43 years old. 20 years meant dying behind prison walls. Therefore, Dutch chose to resolve the situation the sole method he understood. Eliminate Thomas Dewey. Stage it as a theft. Some criminal catches the prosecutor approaching his vehicle. Bang! Situation resolved. However, there existed a complication. The commission's rules. Lucky Luciano had established the commission in 1931 following the conclusion of the Castellammares War. The concept was straightforward yet groundbreaking. 5 families, equivalent voting power, conflicts resolved through conversation rather than violence. No supreme boss anymore. No blood vendettas spanning generations. The commission maintained regulations. And one particular regulation, perhaps the most critical one, dictated that you didn't execute actions that attracted attention to all families. You didn't perform anything that would awaken the federal government and bring them crashing down upon the complete organization. Assassinating a special prosecutor? That defined attracting attention. But Dutch disregarded regulations. He'd never appreciated the commission regardless. Excessive discussion, excessive democracy. During his era, bosses issued decisions and soldiers executed orders. Story concluded. So on October 15th, 1935, Dutch requested an urgent commission gathering. He desired authorization to eliminate Dewey. Not because permission was necessary. Dutch Schultz never requested permission, but because he possessed sufficient intelligence to recognize that if he operated independently and circumstances deteriorated, the remaining families might abandon him. Preferable to document their support for the assassination. That approach, they're all implicated, all involved collectively. The gathering was scheduled for 10 p.m. at the Waldorf Astoria, Suite 39C. Neutral location. The meeting commenced politely enough. 12 individuals surrounding a large conference table. Cigars, whiskey, the appearance of civilization concealing the brutality that had constructed all their fortunes. Lucky Luciano occupied the table's head position. Not because he commanded authority, the commission possessed no single boss, but because everyone acknowledged him as this system's designer, the forward thinker. To Lucky's right sat Meyer Lansky, his most trusted counselor. To his left, Frank Costello, the political strategist. Around the table sat Joe Bonanno, Tommy Lucchese, Joe Prophesy, Albert Anastasia, Vito Genovese, and additional figures whose identities carried significance in the underworld. And at the opposite end, seated separately, separated by his own unpredictability, Dutch Schultz. Dutch proceeded directly to business. Dewey's a threat. He's constructing cases against half the individuals at this table. He possesses witnesses, proof, grand juries. He imprisons me, he pursues the remainder of you. We must address this before circumstances worsen. Address it how? Lucky inquired, though he already anticipated the response. We eliminate him, Dutch stated plainly. Stage it as random. A robbery turned violent. A prosecutor receives gunfire approaching his automobile in a dangerous area. Occurs constantly. The room shifted uneasily. Assassinating a federal prosecutor wasn't simply homicide. It constituted suicide. It would summon the FBI, the Treasury Department, the National Guard. Every law enforcement organization across the nation would descend upon organized crime with unprecedented intensity. Lucky leaned closer. Dutch, permit me to question something. You eliminate Dewey. What transpires afterward? The attention diminishes. We resume operations. Negative, Lucky stated softly. The attention amplifies. They dispatch 20 prosecutors. 50. They don't cease until every individual at this table occupies a prison cell or a grave. You don't assassinate federal prosecutors. Dutch. It's the single boundary we don't violate. It's the single boundary you don't violate, Dutch responded sharply. Because you've grown weak. You believe we can negotiate with these individuals? You believe we can vote our method out of difficulties? This is warfare, Luciano. And during warfare, you eliminate the opposition. Meyer Lansky interjected. Dutch, Lucky's correct. Assassinating Dewey would prove catastrophic. We'd have every police officer, every federal agent, every badge across America pursuing us. It's not justified. Not justified? Dutch's voice elevated. Simple for you to declare, Meyer. Dewey's not constructing a case against you. He's targeting me. And when he secures me, he's pursuing all of you. So I'm questioning this commission. Do we behave like men or do we surrender like animals? The vote. Lucky initiated a vote. All supporting authorization for action against Thomas Dewey. Raise your hand. Dutch's hand rose immediately. Nobody else shifted. All opposing? 11 hands elevated. Every individual except Dutch. Motion unsuccessful, Lucky declared. We don't approach Dewey. Discover an alternative method, Dutch. Depart the jurisdiction. Take an extended vacation in Europe. But you don't assassinate a federal prosecutor. That's when Dutch Schultz shattered. The breaking point. Dutch rose so rapidly his chair tumbled backward. His complexion turned scarlet. Veins protruded from his neck. His hands trembled, not from fear, but from rage. You're refusing me? Dutch's voice resonated through the suite. Me? I constructed my empire while you were stealing food in Little Italy. Luciano. I earned my position in this city. And now you believe you can dictate what I can and cannot execute. The commission voted, Lucky stated calmly. 11-1. That's the procedure. To hell with your commission. Dutch's hand moved toward his jacket. You understand your difficulty, Lucky? You've forgotten your origins. You've forgotten this business is constructed on blood, not ballots. Meyer began rising. Dutch, settle down. Remain seated, Meyer. Dutch barked. His hand vanished inside his jacket. The room tensed. Every individual at that table carried weapons. Most had committed murder previously. They all recognized what was approaching. Dutch extracted a .45 automatic. Cocked it. Aimed it straight at Lucky Luciano's skull. 3 feet distant. Point-blank distance. Impossible to fail. The silence became absolute. Not a respiration, not a motion. Just 12 individuals frozen in time, observing whether the commission, Lucky's magnificent experiment in organized crime, would conclude with a projectile through its founder's head. Dutch's finger positioned on the trigger. His hand steadied. The trembling fury solidified into cold murder. Here's my ballot, Dutch stated quietly. Lucky's response. Lucky Luciano didn't reach for a weapon, didn't summon assistance, didn't even recline in his seat. He simply observed Dutch Schultz with those cold, calculating eyes. The identical eyes that had confronted Salvatore Maranzano before commanding his execution. The identical eyes that had constructed an empire while most individuals were still determining which street corner to operate. He spoke. You squeeze that trigger, Dutch, and you'd better eliminate every individual in this room. Dutch's eyes flickered with confusion. Lucky continued, his voice quiet but carrying absolute certainty's weight. The instant I'm deceased, you've acquired 11 adversaries, 11 families, 11 organizations that will expend every dollar they possess, utilize every favor, sacrifice every soldier to guarantee you perish screaming. They're employed by me, Dutch snarled, but his voice fractured slightly. They're employed by the commission, Lucky corrected. That's the complete purpose. No single individual surpasses the organization. Not me, not you. You assassinate me, you're not assassinating a boss. You're assassinating the system, and systems don't perish with one projectile. Meyer Lansky spoke, his voice steady. Lower it, Dutch. You're not reasoning clearly. I'm reasoning perfectly clearly, Dutch stated, but his weapon hand wavered slightly. You all believe Lucky's so intelligent, but he's guiding you toward a precipice. Dewey is going to imprison us all, and Lucky desires us to remain here and accept it. Negative, Lucky said. I desire us to be intelligent. You eliminate Dewey, the government destroys all of us. You eliminate me, these individuals destroy you. Either method, you lose. The question is whether you possess sufficient intelligence to recognize it. I constructed my empire by refusing to retreat, Dutch stated. And you'll perish identically. Is that your desire, Dutch? You desire to be remembered as the individual who was so foolish, so short-sighted that he destroyed everything we constructed because he was excessively proud to acknowledge reason. The decision, the weapon shook in Dutch's hand. Not from weakness, from the terrible understanding that Lucky was correct. If Dutch squeezed that trigger, he was a deceased man. Even if he eliminated Lucky, even if he somehow eliminated every individual in this room, the organization wouldn't forgive it. The families wouldn't forget. He'd be hunted for the remainder of his brief, terrified existence. And for what purpose? So he could demonstrate he was tougher than a ballot? Dutch Schultz stood there, weapon raised, finger on the trigger, staring at Lucky Luciano. 30 seconds elapsed. Might as well have been 30 hours. Then slowly Dutch lowered the weapon. He didn't holster it, just lowered it, let it dangle at his side like a forgotten object. You're committing an error, Dutch stated, his voice hollow now, vacant of the rage that had filled it moments earlier. Dewey's going to bury us all. Perhaps, Lucky said, but we'll confront it collectively as a commission, the method it's designed to function. Dutch surveyed the table at the 11 individuals who'd voted against him. Individuals he'd collaborated with. individuals he'd battled beside, individuals who would eliminate him without hesitation if he violated the boundary Lucky had established. "I desire it documented," Dutch stated quietly. "When Dewey imprisons me, when he pursues the remainder of you, I desire you all to remember that I attempted to prevent this, that I perceived what was approaching and you all voted to permit it to occur. It's documented," Lucky said. Dutch tucked the weapon back beneath his jacket, turned toward the exit, stopped. "You believe you're so intelligent, Lucky. You believe this commission renders you invulnerable." Dutch's voice was bitter. "But you just created a powerful adversary, and adversaries don't forget." "Neither do I," Lucky replied. Dutch Schultz departed Suite 39C at 10:53 p.m. on October 15, 1935. He would never participate in another commission gathering. The end of Dutch Schultz. October 23, 1935. 8 days following the confrontation. Palace Chop House, Newark, New Jersey. Dutch Schultz was in the restroom cleaning his hands when two individuals entered the restaurant carrying shotguns. They eliminated Dutch's bodyguard first, then his accountant, then his enforcer. Then they waited. When Dutch emerged from the restroom, they fired twice into his abdomen and once into his chest. He'd perish 22 hours later in the hospital, delirious with fever. His final words, a rambling, incoherent mess that police stenographers would transcribe and scholars would analyze for decades. The commission never formally acknowledged commanding the assassination, but everyone understood. Dutch had violated a boundary. Not by aiming a weapon at Lucky, individuals aimed weapons constantly in this business, but by threatening the system itself, by demonstrating he valued his pride over the organization. The commission couldn't permit that to persist. The aftermath. Thomas Dewey continued his prosecutions. He never discovered how close he'd approached death in October 1935. He'd proceed to become New York's governor, campaign for president twice, and perish peacefully in his bed at age 68. Lucky Luciano entered prison in 1936, ironically, on prostitution accusations that bore no connection to his organized crime activities. But even from prison, he operated the commission, directed operations, made decisions. The system he'd constructed was larger than any single individual, even himself. The legacy. The night Dutch Schultz aimed a weapon at a commission gathering became legendary in the underworld. Not because of the violence was ordinary, but because of what it represented. It was the instant the old guard understood they'd lost. The instant the future of organized crime, structured, corporate, governed by regulations rather than egos, became unavoidable. Dutch Schultz attempted to eliminate that future with a .45 automatic. The future eliminated him with 2 shotguns in a Newark chop house. And Lucky Luciano? He returned to constructing his empire one ballot at a time. If this account moved you, hit that subscribe button. We're sharing the Lucky Luciano stories that history overlooked, the instances that made him untouchable, the decisions that altered organized crime permanently. Drop a like if you believe Lucky made the correct judgment. And in the comments, was Lucky justified in commanding Dutch's death, or should he have dismissed it? Activate notifications because next time we're sharing the account of how Lucky Luciano made one phone call from Italy that demolished Vito Genovese's empire in 48 hours. Remember, in the underworld, you don't lead through fear. You lead through vision. And the individuals who couldn't perceive that, they concluded in chop houses in Newark, bleeding out on the floor while the future walked away.